Tony from Modcon Campers here. Like everybody else out there, we're suffering from camping withdrawals, so we thought we'd get one of our campers out that we haven't used for a while and do some cleaning and some maintenance on it, just so it's ready for next time when hopefully very shortly we'll be able to go camping again. So first thing I like to do is check my battery status. So we'll follow me around here and we'll have a look at what status our batteries are at. We can look inside. Need to turn the isolator switch off because we keep that off while we're not camping, and we can see the status of our batteries is 12.5. These really need to have a charge. Now on our FF1, of course, we have an Anderson plug down by the batteries, but we also have an Anderson plug to the front of the trailer which would normally be plugged into your vehicle while you're driving. So we'll use this one. Plug this in. Into some power. So the first thing I like to do is check the status of the charger, and it definitely needed to have a charge. Okay, now if I walk back down to the compartment where the voltmeter is, so now when I look in here I should see that that voltmeter is showing a significant change. It's now up to about 13.5 volts, which means that battery charger is doing what it should. We never assume, because something like the circuit breaker popping, and if that had done that, obviously there's no power coming to the batteries, so always double check that everything is working. Okay, so that is fine. It's charging away nicely now. We can carry on and do the rest of our maintenance. Okay, the next thing I want to do is open up my camper. I want to take full advantage of the sunshine and give the maximum time I can for that canvas to get some air. So first thing I'll do is level up my camper. That's a bit squeaky, let's have a look. Luckily I've got a trusty can of food grade silicone on hand. It's all in the can, this is. That's better. Stopped all the squeak. Now we can move on. Follow me around this way and we'll open up the camper. Now this should not be a problem. It takes 30 to 60 seconds to open up, so there's no excuse not to do it. Okay, we want to follow this process at least 2 to 3 weeks if we haven't been out camping. The same as putting our batteries on charge. This is very important to open this up, air it out. This will in itself stop a lot of mold, mildew, of any of those problems that we're going to have. It's also good practice. So I'm just going to open it up now. I've stopped halfway putting the camper up because while I've got the struts at the fullest extension, I'll just give those a little bit of maintenance as well. Just make sure that the struts are nice and clean, and while I'm here, my trusty silicone spray, I'm just going to spray some of these bolts. I just want to keep as much of that pesky rust away from them as I can. Okay, keeping those clean all the time. When they're at their full extension, just stops dust prematurely breaking the seals down. Okay, follow me in and we'll start looking at the inside of our camper. Okay, so we go inside the camper now. All we need to do here is push the back door out. Okay, now we're inside. First thing we want to do is open up the windows. Firstly, to get some ventilation through here to help air out the camper. Secondly, to make sure the zips are all working fine. If they're dusty and dirty, which they shouldn't be when you've packed it away, what you need to do is use a soft bristle brush on the zips, and then you can use our trusty silicone spray, and using something as a guard so we don't get the spray all over our canvas, we can just go through and spray all the zips to make sure they're performing as they should do. The next thing we want to do is make sure there's no marks on the canvas from mildew or mold, and if there are, we want to make sure that we leave the camper up and dry those out. That's the best way to kill mold, is just by the sunshine. If the marks are still there, then there are other little tips that we can help you with. One of the best things is something like these cleaning erasers, which come in a variety of forms. You can get them from all sorts of different places, your supermarkets, Bunnings, etc. And they are just a great little thing. So when you're using these erasers, don't use a scrubbing action, just a gentle rubbing. Okay, we need to protect that waterproofing on the canvas. If we damage that, then we have other obvious problems. Hopefully we don't have any mould in our camper, because we should have put some damp red containers through, a large one in the main cabin and some smaller ones throughout all the storage compartments. You can easily tip these out and reuse them again for up to 60 days in most cases. Again, these are available from Bunnings and supermarkets, etc. Right, that is the inside sorted. Now what I want to do is come outside with my trusty can of silicone spray, and I'm going to attack anything that has moving parts and any sort of bolts or washers which look like they're going to rust at some point. These are great to get. Anything where there's a moving part, of course, is going to have susceptibility to getting water into it and dust. By spraying something like that onto it, it's going to reduce the amount of dust and water to get in. Again, anywhere where I can see moving parts. Stabilisers, I'm going to cover those and other things in the next video on maintenance, so I'll see you soon. I'm going to talk about grease points and lubricating the hinges and all the other important areas to keep our camper nice. Starting with the coupling. We've got an off-road coupling which needs to keep movement 360 degrees. Important to keep the grease going in this. In this particular one, you've got a grease nipple at the front and at the rear of it. Basically, I want to get enough grease in there until I can see the grease coming out through the joints. Then that's enough, and we can move on to the next stage. Okay, the next thing we want to grease is our doors. We have a grease nipple top and bottom hinge. Now when we're out travelling around, I don't expect everybody to carry a grease gun with them. At this stage we can get there while we're doing our maintenance at home. Out travelling, even if I don't have a grease gun, because they're pin hinges, I can lift them up and get grease inside there, keep them lubricated while I'm travelling. Okay, so the next thing we want to grease is the tailgate hinges. One grease nipple there and another one at the bottom. The only other reason we need the grease gun is the suspension bolts. Right, so we need to grease the suspension points. There are 4 bolts holding on the suspension. There's a grease nipple on each one of those. Basically the same principle. Pump enough grease in until it comes out the edges of bushes and you should be fine. Do that regularly. If you go in on off-road excursions, try to do that daily, as all your maintenance. Okay, to the next stage of our maintenance schedule. We're looking at lubricating and checking out our stabilisers to make sure all the functions work properly. So I can grab my trusty old handle. It seems like hard work to me, so I'm going to get my little 18-volt drill out and do that a lot easier. Just making sure the action works up and down nicely. Just be very careful, because it is easy to hurt your wrist if you're not careful with when that stops. While I'm there, trusty can of silicone spray, and I want to lube everything that's got moving parts or looks like it might have some sort of rust, including the handle. Make sure that everything's good. Try that one more time with it's lubed, and then make sure the action going up and down works as well. That's awesome. Now I can move on to the other 3 on the trailer. That brings us on to the jockey wheel. Very important part of our camper, so we want to keep it well maintained. Silicone spray on the shaft, as far up as I can get. Wind if I have to get more shaft out. Make sure that's well lubricated. Don't forget the nuts and bolts, any of the parts that need any sort of lubrication if they're moving parts. That should do it. Oh, we've still got a squeak here, so let's have a go at the handle. And now we've got a fully functioning jockey wheel again. If you've gone for the upgrade to the extreme off-road jockey wheel, there are a few more moving parts on this. So a little bit more lubrication required, just to keep it nice. Screwing in here, if I can find parts that are going to be moving. Remembering on the extreme off-road, it also has a grease nipple there, so you can put some grease in to help the shaft movement. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check the movement on the shaft. I'm also going to move the jockey wheel up and down, swing it up and down. I can do that because I've stabilised this very, very well. Okay, I'll wind this back up all the way up. That means I know that the up and down movement is fine. Then I can do the swing up. In this case, I do the external adjustment, push it up at that point. Now I can do the swing away, so I know that all of those features are working. Swing that down, lock it back into place, and that's it done. This time we're going to move on to wheel nuts, torque settings, suspension bolts, etc., tyre pressures. So the first thing I'll start with is checking the torque setting on our wheel nuts, which we like to keep at 110 foot-pound for our Modcons. Take the wheel cap off if you've got one. I happen to have here the torque wrench preset at 110 foot-pound. Clicking through, always going to the opposite side wheel nut. This ensures you get an even spread of torque throughout the hub. So they're all done. And put my wheel caps back on. If you don't have your torque wrench with you, always use a 19mm part of your wheel brace. Just note that not all wheel braces will fit, but this is a good little alternative if you don't have anything else with you. Pretty much as tight as most people can get it. There's a good setting. The other option, of course, is a 1/2 inch bar with a 19mm socket. If you have been travelling without a torque wrench and been doing everything by feel, make sure when you do get back to civilization to check all those settings properly with a decent torque wrench set to the right settings. Moving on to the tyres. On the tar seal, we want to keep these tyre pressures at 40 psi. I always have a tyre pressure gauge with me. Most of them will have one, especially if we've got a deflation kit. Check this one out first, my nice little digital unit. And what do you know, even though the batteries work, it's not working. Keep it simple, always have a nice little easy unit to use. No batteries, does what it should. At this stage we're showing 36 pound, so we need to put some pressure in these tyres before we head out. Okay, onto our suspension and our shock bolts. We wanted to check those. We want to do this daily if we're out there in the real world, especially corrugations, off-road stuff. Very important to check them daily. That way we know we're going to return home safely. So suspension bolts, 24mm spanner. If you've got a nice bar, just as easy to use. Now it is set at 190 foot-pound. Very hard to get that by hand. If you do find that you've got any movement in those bolts, get it as tight as you can. I would check it at least daily, if not more often if I'm doing corrugated work. Repeat that on the shock absorber bolts. In this case we're working on one of our hard floor campers. So we're going to require an 18mm on one end and a 19mm on the other end. Repeat that process through the 4 suspension bolts and the 4 shock bolts. That should keep you safe.